and he's up here at the front, and he's going to be talking about the GROW campaign. We're going to hear from Jane Cocking, our humanitarian director, who's at the back, waving, and she's going to talk particularly about the East African crisis and also managing some of the obstacles when it comes to fulfilling on our work, particularly political ones. And then we're going to hear from Chris Johns, who's the director of the UK Poverty Programme. So I'm going to sit down now and leave it to those three to make their presentations.
Thank you very much, Karen. And as Karen says, I'm Phil Bloomer, the Campaigns and Policy Director. And I'm going to speak about something that will be time later to work on in small groups. We're very keen to learn from you today about how we can improve the GROW campaign over the coming 3 years. I'm going to describe in 10 minutes what we've been trying to do over the last 11 months, and then we're very keen to learn from you as people around the country about how we can ensure that this is the most powerful campaign that we can possibly create around the issue of food justice in a resource-constrained world. So the GROW campaign, one thing we're absolutely sure about in terms of the GROW campaign is that this is the issue of vital importance to poverty and suffering, and our mandate to work with others to overcome poverty, suffering and injustice over the next 3 years, which will be the lifetime of the campaign. So it's vital to our mandate precisely because of the context in which we live. The context is one in which we are, for many poor people, one of the greatest issues that they are living with now is the rising level of competition for natural resources and the rising level of stress of those natural resources. So to give just a few examples, for many people now, climate change is already upon them. I came back from Uganda only yesterday, where many of the people, one of the first issues that they're facing is that the fact that their seasons have changed. They no longer know when the rains are going to come, whether the rains are going to be sustained, and therefore whether this vital resource that their agriculture has always depended on will actually nurture them over the coming year. Climate change, of course, we're heading now, with the failures of the Copenhagen Accord in 2009, the world is actually heading for about 3.54 degrees centigrade rise. That's not distributed evenly around the world. There will be 8 degrees centigrade rise for much of sub-Saharan Africa. And therefore, the levels of heat stress that those people will be dealing with in terms of the heat stress on crops and the heat stress on humans will mean that many of those areas are facing a very difficult future. Equally, we've got a situation now where fresh water is of substantial scarcity for many people. In almost half the world's population, 3 billion people, live in places where supply outstrips demand. Sorry, where demand outstrips supply. Fantastic. You can tell I'm an economist. What that means, of course, is that there is rising levels of dispute over the access to fresh water. And that's why we face a future where we either live together with a future of a shared prosperity, where we actually look to each other to work together to make sure those resources are shared for everybody to be able to live together, or we face a darker future of increased dog-eat-dog and winner takes all. And that's what this campaign is also about. We've got rises in food prices because of increased demand. We've got also this issue that the campaign has focused on substantially, the issue of increasing levels of also stress on not just water but also land. And around a fifth of a billion hectares in the world have been taken, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, just in the last 10 years, most of them through secretive deals, and we'll come on to that later. And this graph just shows what are the expected scale of the increased demand for food, and therefore the increased levels of production. Fortunately, of course, we hope that the 40% of food which is currently grown and wasted will also mean that the level of demand for food will be met partly by reducing waste, which is about a consumer issue, but the rest will be also about investment in smallholder agriculture and investment in commercial farming, which will take citizens' action to make sure that that happens. Thank you. And then, so what is GROW? So very quickly, what is the campaign and how does it respond to those challenges? The first thing to say is that the campaign is based around the idea, the principle that we need a future where everyone on the planet always has enough to eat. A future of that shared prosperity, where we see a level of equality which holds to the basic fundamental values of Oxfam, which are about our shared humanity. It also, and therefore our campaign objectives are built around those values. Firstly, that we're going to need that growing movement for a better future. We're going to need that movement based on us as consumers, because we will have to all be able to share this planet and its extraordinary richness of resources. But to do that, we will have to live in greater levels of equality. But also, us as a growing movement of citizens around the world demanding much more of our politicians to make sure that that shared future is one in which we can all live in a level of prosperity. The second, so that's a big sort of overlying one. The other four are really around the things that we see as four fundamental issues which we believe as Oxfam, working with others, we can properly challenge over the next 3 years. The first one is to actually stop land and water grabs which dispossess poor people by corporations and or governments. Secondly, that we get climate change deals, note the plural, not a single deal, but indeed working across regions, across alliances of ambition, that we achieve governments coming together, those governments who really now understand the vital threat that this faces, that this presents to the planet and to the future of humanity, particularly for poor people, that we win those climate change deals. Fourthly, that we're investing in those vital people who the 500 million peasant farmers, most of them women, who actually feed most of the people, the 2 billion people who live on around $2 a day or less. So it's those small farmers who are feeding the poorest on the planet. It's vital that we increase their resilience, their productivity, so that they can carry on in that vital role. And fifthly, that we obviously are able to respond to the levels of food price crisis. We've seen two in the last 3 years. And so we're in a situation where the global food prices are both increasing as well as becoming more volatile. So what's happened since the launch? I'm going to give you just a smattering of some of the things that we've been doing. The first one is we've been involved in trying to build that movement. And much of that investment has actually gone on, not so much in the UK, but actually in many developing countries. And one thing we are proud of in the campaign is the level of participation that there's been from our partners and allies in so many countries, in developing countries. But we've been doing it through that level of conversation rather than using key events like the G8 or the G20, which in some ways have become rather tired in the way in which we can achieve the kind of things that we're seeking to achieve, the ambition that we have for this campaign. So we believe we have to build that movement through more of a conversation style. We've got at least 37 million people exposed to the campaign over the last period through all the advertising, the TV, the PR work that we've done, the celebrities work that we've done, the campaign actions that we've been doing around the world. So that's a significant achievement, but it's nowhere near what we have to achieve over the next period. Another element of this has been to really the campaign has started from the very beginning. Yes, has started from the very beginning to really focus on the importance of women in this campaign, and to show the role that women play, both as smallholder farmers producing food for the poorest people on the planet, but also as activists, as citizens, and as consumers. And so this is just one example of female food heroes. We've had competitions around the world in 18 countries, from Armenia to the Philippines to Tanzania to Russia, where we've been highlighting and getting a lot of press and publicity and action across allies and partners to highlight the role that women play in this. Another example is the area of land grabs. And here, I don't know what to say, we've had a major impact on the international debate on land grabs. That I am absolutely sure. If you look at the Africa Progress panel of Kofi Annan, of Michel Camdessou, of Obasanjo, of Graça Machel, that issued their report only last week, That report highlights the role that Oxfam has played in raising this key debate about the dispossession of literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of peasants across Africa by these secretive land deals that are simply removing people. It reminds me very much of Stalin and his attitude to the kulaks and the collectivization of agriculture. But this time, it's commercial agriculture that's going in and saying these are lands without peoples for an investor without land. So we can simply remove them and get those tractors in. And we're in a case in Uganda now where 20,000 people have been displaced from their lands. Those people have been left destitute. Their homes, their lands, their schools, their churches, their mosques and their health centres have simply been burnt. And those people have been left with nothing. And we've taken up that case and are involved in extremely difficult and tense negotiations in Uganda around that issue, in order to be able to gain some form of redress from both the international investors that invested in that land grab, as well as from the company involved. But we do it not just to ensure that there is proper redress for those dispossessed poor people, but also to highlight the fact that the international performance standards that should have cared for those people, that should have ensured that they have compensation, to expose the fact that they are both inadequate and and despite being inadequate, are even then not properly applying. And therefore, what we've had is to make sure that we are able to bring that global level of concern as well as the local. Another example, very quickly, is the Coldplay tour, where Coldplay, which you're all obviously aware of, is one of these new musical combos, travelled the world, playing their instruments and gaining food from the local population for their minstrel work. But Coldplay has been involved very much in promoting the Grow campaign, and we've already had around 250,000 people exposed through the tour to the Grow campaign. Many people through Twitter, through video, blogs, and all the other things. And by the end of the global tour, we're expecting 1 million people to have been exposed through Chris Martin and the band. Another example, finally, is not only are we involved in that popular campaigning, that PR work, about building that movement, but we also have to win the intellectual debate. And this is where there will be copies later for you to see, but we've been involved in really creating a conceptual framework for the new approach that's necessary to the issue of resources. And so we've taken something that's been developed by earth scientists, which is about the planetary boundaries, that show that there are 9 key planetary boundaries, such as climate change, fresh water and land use. We're already crashed through 3 of those boundaries and need to come back in. But it's not enough for us to describe, as a social justice organisation, the fact that humanity's crashed through those boundaries. What we also need to do is make sure that we are holding to the social foundations of that shared prosperity for the future. And so it's also the combination of those that's going to be vital. And this has been taken up by the high-level panel of the United Nations Secretary General. It's been taken up now. We're providing advice and support to the African Development Bank for them to incorporate this into their work. And we've also got a huge amount of interest for the Rio Plus 20 conference, which is coming up in a week's time. So, finally, what have we learned from Grow so far? There's a much longer list than this, unfortunately. But I've sought to just highlight a couple of things that I think may be important for us. One is that, that we have been successful in ensuring that Oxfam remains one of the global leaders, working with our allies and partners to really stress this issue of how do we create food justice in a resource-constrained world? How do we talk about the 1 billion people who will go to bed hungry tonight, but also start to explain to people the fact that this will worsen unless we deliver what's necessary for the future in terms of our resource-constrained world. And to build in those, therefore, what we've been working on in terms of our climate change campaign, our work on land and water and inequality. And also that we've built these national campaigns in developing countries, which we did much less of, to be honest, in campaigns such as Make Trade Fair. But we face real challenges. And here I focus particularly on the UK, because obviously you may have other reflections, but we'd love your ideas. Firstly, campaigning on grow has been a real challenge. We've faced real difficulties in the land grabbing campaign. Because we've gone into mediation, we've forced the company, to be frank, to come into mediation around those 20,000 people who've been displaced. In that mediation, one of the conditions was that we went into effectively radio silence, i.e. not allowed to speak to the media at all. And that has meant that our work on land grabs has been incredibly active and yet almost invisible. So that's one area. How do we keep the profile of the campaign going? What would work for you in terms of ensuring that? And the other one, which you may have seen through the presentation I've just given, but how do we avoid, first of all, old narratives about hunger? You'll see some of the agencies, some of the charities in Britain using more and more the images that we used to use of emaciated children in passive poses with their passive mothers, with flies in their eyes. Really, we don't want to use those images because we know that's not the reality of most poor people who are still acting as human agents, trying to do their best to make sure that they can build a future. But we want to be able to not go back to those old narratives, but we also want to avoid the complexity of narrative, which perhaps you've just heard from me. You know, food justice in a resource-constrained world. We're talking about the 1 billion people who are going to bed hungry tonight, and we're talking about the future. And I think to some extent, we've not managed to deliver that complexity of message in a way which most people can understand and feel touched in their hearts by. So those are some of the challenges I put forward. So I hope you'll be able to join some of you anyway will be able to join the groups and give your views to us later. Thank you.